But we begin tonight with the fulfillment of a promise made more than 8 years ago.
People who did this act on America and who may be planning further acts are evil people. They're flat evil. That's all they can think about is evil. And as a nation of good folks, we're going to hunt them down, and we're going to find them, and we will bring them to justice.
Hunt them down, find them, bring them to justice. That was President Bush 2 weeks after September 11th, promising to capture and bring to justice those responsible for the 9/11 attacks. Well, now, more than 8 years after that promise was made, we still haven't caught Osama bin Laden, but among others, with some alleged responsibility for 9/11. Finally, we learned today that while justice has been delayed, it will not forever be denied. The Bush administration, which talked so tough about getting justice for the perpetrators of 9/11, ultimately left office without doing that. It has been left to the next administration, the incoming Obama administration, to make good on the promises of justice that are now nearly a decade old.
Today, I am announcing that the Department of Justice will pursue prosecution in federal court of the 5 individuals accused of conspiring to commit the 9/11 attacks. After 8 years of delay, those allegedly responsible for the attacks of September the 11th will finally face justice. They will be brought to New York, to answer for their alleged crimes in a courthouse just blocks away from where the Twin Towers once stood.
Attorney General Eric Holder today announcing that alleged 9/11 mastermind Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and 4 other suspects will be transferred from Guantanamo to a New York City federal courthouse to finally face trial. Today's announcement means their trials will take place, as he said, just a short walk from Ground Zero in Lower Manhattan. The Attorney General says prosecutors will seek the death penalty for all 5 defendants if they are found guilty. In addition to the 9/11 defendants, the Justice Department also announced today that 5 additional terrorism suspects will not get a day in court. They will instead face military commissions for their alleged role in the bombing of the USS Cole in the year 2000 and other attacks on U.S. military personnel. These are big developments that have been a very long time coming. And in a move about as anticipated as the sun rising tomorrow morning, the Republican Party says it is outraged, not over the military commission's decision, but over the fact that the 9/11 defendants will finally be facing justice in real courts. Senator Jeff Sessions said, quote, "Our court system was never designed for this purpose. These trials will turn lawyers, juries, and judges into targets." Senator John Kyle said past trials of terrorists have proven that our civilian courts are not the appropriate venue to handle international terrorism trials. Senator John McCain blasting the decision tonight during a news conference in Arizona.
I do not understand why a war criminal should be able to have the same rights as a common criminal. They should reverse this decision, and they should be tried in military tribunals.
And then there's the former mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani.
In a criminal trial, the rights of terrorists are more important than anything else. I mean, our criminal justice system is geared to let guilty people go free, if there's any doubt. We think they're criminals. These are soldiers in a war against us, and the rules of war should apply.
The argument of these critics is essentially that U.S. courts are not capable of dealing with this sort of thing. They're not capable of dealing with terrorism prosecutions, that we need some sort of alternate system of justice to handle terrorism. Terrorism cases can never be handled by the kind of normal American legal proceedings that resulted in Omar Abdel-Rahman, the so-called blind sheik, serving a life sentence in North Carolina for conspiracy to bomb New York City landmarks, or Ramzi Youssef serving a life sentence at the Supermax prison in Colorado. He was the bomb maker for the first World Trade Center bombing in 1993. Or Richard Reed, the shoe bomber, convicted for attempting to use weapons of mass destruction. He's also serving a life sentence in Colorado. Or Zacharias Moussaoui, convicted of being a 9/11 co-conspirator. He faced trial in Virginia and was sentenced to life in prison. What exactly was so insufficient about our normal constitutional legal system for handling cases like those ones? Those guys ended up joining domestic multiple murderers and or terrorists in prison, people like Timothy McVeigh, Charles Manson, Eric Rudolph. And now, finally, 8 years on, we are bringing at least some of the people accused of the attacks of 9/11 back to the scene of the crime to face American justice, amid the remarkable, pitiful clamor of politicians saying how much that makes them afraid. Joining us now is Democratic Senator Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He's a member of the Senate Judiciary and Intelligence Committees. He's also a former federal prosecutor from the state of Rhode Island. Senator Whitehouse, thanks for joining us so late on a Friday. I really appreciate it.
I'm happy to be with you, Rachel. Thank you for inviting me.
As a former U.S. attorney, what is your reaction to so many Republicans, really, claiming today that federal courts aren't equipped to handle terrorism cases?
Well, the record is to the contrary. Yep. There have been literally hundreds of trials of terrorists. The Federal Bureau of Prisons estimates that there are more than 350 domestic and international terrorists incarcerated in our prisons after having been convicted. And the military commissions have a record of 3 convictions. So if you're looking for the tried and true and tested way of delivering justice to terrorists, the federal courts with the United States prosecutors of the Department of Justice are the proven way to go.
You sit on the Intelligence and Judiciary Committees, both of which are really at the heart of the U.S. government response to terrorism. Beyond the question of guilt for these individual defendants, do you think there is an impact on al-Qaeda's strength, its ability to recruit people who would attack us, to have a Khalid Sheikh Mohammed on trial or in prison alongside more common criminals instead of languishing the way he has at Guantanamo and in CIA secret prisons?
Well, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed and his cohorts will obviously be on trial, but in the eyes of the world, so will the American system of justice be on trial. And we have a long tradition of very effective justice being delivered in our courts and by our prosecutors. So I think in terms of the lesson to the world, it's a strong one. I also think that it's an important lesson to scratch away where we can at the notion that these people are jihad warriors. That ennobles them in a way that helps their mission. The more we treat them like common criminals, the more effective our strategy at winning the battle for minds, I think, in the Middle East and around the world.
That goes right to the heart of one of the other arguments that's coming from critics of this decision today. Republicans saying that if we allow these defendants to be tried in a real American court, as part of that process, they will be allowed to speak. The worry being that their ideology is so dangerous that they will be persuading, I guess, recruits to join them by virtue of what they say in court. Do you think there's legitimacy to that argument?
I think it's obviously a concern, but in this country we put up with a lot of distasteful speech in the broader interest of showing the world that we are a country that can tolerate all of that. And the lesson that America imparts to the world, the beacon of light that we hold up in this shadowed world, is probably our strongest asset. And so I feel confident that when we go to that through the proven mechanism of prosecutors of the United States Department of Justice bringing cases in United States federal courts, we show a very strong part of America to the world.
Senator Whitehouse, the Obama administration also today recommitting itself to military tribunals for an accused bomber of the USS Cole and for 4 other defendants. Should those cases also be taken up in a real Article III court?
I think behind the question about the federal court is the underlying question of whose call this should be. And as a former prosecutor, I'm very comfortable that this call should be the call of the prosecutors and the military officers who are engaged in the executive branch in deciding what is the best venue to get the result that we want, which is a fair and solid demonstration of American justice. And I think in these cases, a very strong likelihood that we want that conviction and we want punishment. To leave that decision in their hands is the right way to go constitutionally. And of all the people interfere, I think members of Congress are the worst to interfere in that decision. First of all, we don't know what we're talking about in terms of the facts that the prosecutors have looked at in making that decision. And second of all, this is an executive function, and Congress is the least suited branch of government to get involved in these prosecutorial decisions. As a prosecutor, if a member of Congress tried to tell me what to do with a prosecution, I would push back very, very hard. It simply isn't a proper role. So there's I think, considerable deference that should properly attend to Attorney General Holder's decision. He has the facts. Members of Congress don't.
Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island, speaking both as a Democratic U.S. Senator and also as a former federal prosecutor tonight. Thank you very much for joining us, sir.
A pleasure.